Hey everyone, just wanted to make a quick video about some low range studies and ways of improving your low range. I've noticed in some of my incoming freshmen and also in some of the high school students that I've been teaching, they really haven't had to play in the low range very much. They've been playing principal in their high school bands or in orchestras. And so we need to develop some ways of kind of practicing these skills so that you can get all over the horn in all the ranges. So I guess I'd like to show you a couple exercises, but first, the kind of the most important thing is how do you actually study the low range, and I think it's really important to put it into context and also use resources that you've already played before. So I highly recommend taking your Bordoni Rochu book and working on the first 10 exercises out of that, playing it down the octave. Some of these are going to get pretty low, some of it's going to get pretty silly sounding, but I think it's a really good thing to start being able to do. Plus you can hear all of those intervals because you've already worked on those etudes, and so that it should be pretty easy to actually work on low range that way. I also recommend checking out the Blazevich Tupa Studies book. Those are not necessarily down a full octave for most of them, so they're a little more attainable, and a lot of those tunes should also be pretty familiar to you as a trombone player. Finally, I'd definitely recommend checking out the David Vining Range Songs book. That's from Mountain Peak Press. And working on descending scales, just into the extreme low register. Making sure that your half steps, your whole steps are really in tune, and that you're not manipulating too much with the embouchure, but you're really using the slide to your advantage, and you're really slowing down your air and using a wider air column. I think that'll help a lot. Some things, some of these ideas that I'm going to be describing, they come from some of Norman Bolter's books, some of Jonathan Allen's teaching as well. So they're not necessarily brand new, and there's lots of resources for all of this stuff. One of the things that I think is really important is you do have to drop the jaw to play in the low range, but it's not this extreme jaw drop. I know that one of the problems that I found in my playing was that I was actually dropping too far, opening up too wide, having such a large cavity and wide airstream that I wasn't able to actually focus my embouchure on a certain note or on a certain pitch. One other thing that's really possible that can happen is the aperture, the lips actually open up too wide when you drop the jaw, and then it's not possible to buzz. So remember that just because you're playing in the low range and your lips are relaxed in the center of the aperture so that you can get a slower buzz from your slower, wider air column, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're far apart. If they're too far apart, you won't get any buzz at all. It's the difference between doing this and doing this. So, something to think about when you're actually approaching the inside of the mouthpiece. Again, I try to just use as little change as possible when I go into the low register. So, what my goals are when I'm warming up are to figure out what that should feel like and how it can feel that way without doing major jaw changes or major embouchure aperture changes. So, I'd like to just do a little bit of a drone on F and do some buzzing, and work my way down by half steps to a C-ish, or sometimes I'll go down to pedal B flat. Things to notice while that's happening. As I go down in pitch, my upper lip is actually flexing forward in the mouthpiece, and sometimes it has a tendency to kind of push the mouthpiece down a little bit or pivot it down a little bit. I think that's a pretty natural thing. Sometimes people actually pivot upwards when they go into the low range, so it's more like this. I kind of forced that was extreme. But what's happening there is they're actually rolling their lower lip out in order to get that lower buzz. I think that's something to avoid because it's just not feasible to play in the low range really quick with your lip rolled out like that and then go back up to the middle or upper range and roll the lip back. I think it's too much movement. So I try to just keep it all on my upper lip and try to keep it as minimal as possible. It's an extreme pivot, but just to show you. So hopefully that helps with the mouthpiece buzzing. What I like to do is make sure that I can buzz the note I'm actually aiming for. It may be extreme. The other thing that you can do is actually put this on an inspirometer just to give yourself a little bit of resistance and make sure that you're actually moving air past the embouchure and it's not cut off by the teeth like this. If I'm cutting the air off with my teeth during the buzz, this will happen. So watch out for that sort of thing too. So the second of the 4 exercises that I like to do is play starting on a B flat and working my way down second partial to a second partial F in 6th position. Something like this. I'm trying to just keep this as natural as possible and let the slide actually do the pitch change. It's not 100% for me, but it's pretty close. And then I'll do that all the way down to an F, breathe in through my nose, articulate the F, take a second, breathe in through my nose, bring my slide back to first position and use the F side to play the F. In 6th position should basically be the same embouchure as the F that you play with the valve. Now often we change that embouchure because we're so used to it being so different from when we first got our valve. So that's something to be careful of. Try doing the same exercise down in the second partial with the valve down, and you can breathe in through the nose just to try to keep the aperture and the embouchure all the same. And then you can add in breathing through the mouth like you normally would when you're playing. So one of the things you might have noticed is it started to break up on me just a little bit as I got down to D flat and C. That means that something's changing here that didn't need to change, probably. And so it's really important to try to keep that the same. You can do the same glissing pattern. I often lose track of my intonation when I do it like that, so I like to do it by half steps, kind of in the Remington style. The other thing you can do is add a drone. Now all of this can also be done glissing down into the first partial into the pedal range. And so that's kind of the last thing I'd like to show you is how I would work that out. So I'm going to drone on a B flat. Do that exercise, what I'm trying to do is, again, the most minimal change I possibly can into the pedal range. The idea being that these ranges really aren't that different. All you're doing is going down an octave from your second partial B flat. You can turn that into a lip slur at that point and try to make that a little bit more developed. Two other exercises I like to do when I'm working into the second partial F valve range have to do with just making sure, again, that we're doing minimal changes here and that we're allowing the vowel to change and that we're allowing the airspeed to really make that change for us. So the first thing that I like to do is bend the pitch in the valve range. So what I usually do is I go down by half steps again, so this is kind of your Remington scale, plus I kind of give myself the pitch reference so that I can then do the lip bend with my chops. So kind of like this. So I do that bend without changing the slide. If I go too far like that, I try to make it so that it's actually in tune. So I do those lip bends, and that's just, again, to train the airspeed and the vowel sound that goes along and corresponds with those low notes. The second little mini exercise into the second partial valve range that I do is I take the outer slide off, like that, and then I do the same lip bending exercise, except I don't have any pitch reference this time. You could do this with a drone, or you could do it with a partner and have the partner actually be playing the intervals for you so that you're keeping things in tune. And then you can actually bend all the way down into the first partial pedal range. So those are just some exercises. This is not how I actually play the horn. This is how I practice the horn. And I'm not necessarily advocating that this is how you would play these things, but it's a way of helping you get to these points and make these changes happen. So I hope these are just a couple of exercises that can help out with some of this low range stuff. Again, this is specifically for students that I've been working with at the high schools, or a couple of students that I've been working with here at the UL studio to help develop these exercises. So thanks again, and hopefully this helps.